everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Want to Know podcast. Today is obviously September 11th, and today is a little over a week since we found out about the execution of 6 hostages in Gaza. It's a heavy day, it's a heavy week, and the Jewish community has been through a lot recently. I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our soldiers, our fighters, our rescuers, our community leaders in the U.S. and Israel alike for their restless work to protect us and to help us. This recognition is often forgotten, especially in a time of war, and I wanted to take a moment to sincerely thank anyone that this applies to. I also want to take a moment to express my sincerest condolences to the hostage families who have lost their loved ones, and my sincerest concern and prayers for any families and friends that are still waiting for their hostages to return or have lost loved ones throughout the war in Israel. Of course, I want to also acknowledge anyone that was affected by 9/11. I know today is a difficult day for many people. I would have never imagined that the terrorism we saw in 2001 is the same terrorism we are fighting today in 2024. With that said, it seemed a very fitting day to bring on today's guest, Sam Freed, onto the podcast, as Sam is a first sergeant paratrooper reservist in the IDF. Sam Freed is 27, he's from New York, works in finance at an international bank, and he served in the IDF 890 Paratroopers Battalion from 2020 to 2022. On October 7th, Sam knew he had to take action to protect Jews and eradicate the inhumanity that Hamas brought to the world, so he traveled to Israel to serve as a reservist. Sam recently returned from fighting in Gaza. He served as a commander of a squadron and as a sharpshooter in the middle and south of Gaza for approximately 50 days. He was on the front lines fighting Hamas, as well as on several high-priority missions in the West Bank. Since returning home, Sam has been committed to Hasbara, or Israel advocacy, speaking to Jewish and non-Jewish communities around the country, whether at universities, churches, mosques, on panels, debates, synagogues, schools, etc., to promote his 3 foundational pillars. His first is empowering Jews and allies to be proud in today's environment. His second is peace through dialogue. And his third, humanizing the IDF. At the beginning of the year, I met Sam at a very fancy-schmancy dinner that was hosted by none other than Britt Levy, who, as you know, is a former podcast guest, and the dinner's theme was Jewish leaders. I personally was very honored to have been invited, but I was not surprised in the slightest that Sam was there. At that dinner, everyone went around the room and introduced themselves and talked about what they do, and I remember being very touched by Sam's story because it still felt very raw at the time. So I came up to him to talk after dinner when we all had the schmoozing part of the evening. And I remember feeling like people at the dinner, they didn't fully grasp like the oomph of what exactly Sam went through. And the fact that him being at the dinner was kind of a miracle. I came up to Sam and I was basically like, dude, how are you managing? And I remember he said something like, it's very tough. I have a hard time sleeping. I go one day at a time. The only thing that helps me is talking about it. And this is a theme we've heard from soldiers many times before on the podcast. Weeks later, to see Sam speak up in a huge way for the Jewish community, put his life on the line to advocate for Israel on college campuses. I mean, it's just amazing. He went viral overnight. Look at Sam's Instagram if you haven't already. He's an amazing debater, a very eloquent speaker, and he just lays down the law. I eagerly await for his next videos. Sam is also just a beloved member of the community, both among young activists as well as seasoned activists like Sammy Steigman. Despite going through a very challenging period in his life, Sam continues to give and give and give generously. He's compassionate, he's patient, he's kind. But unfortunately, ladies, I'm not quite sure that he's single, but I digress. Anyway, I could rave about Sam for days, and above all else, I'm just grateful for his friendship. I can't wait for you to hear this episode, and I do hope you find comfort today hearing it from someone who just gets it. Please enjoy. Hey, Sam, welcome to People Jew Want to Know podcast. How are you today?
God, I'm doing well. How are you?
It's great to have you on. I'm good. I have so many questions planned for you. Let me get right to it. Tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Well, who am I? My name is Sam Freed. The way that, I guess if I could describe myself in one word, I'd say I'm a fighter. I think that really defines who I am as a person. Just a little backstory on myself. I grew up in New York, born and raised. I had a lifelong dream since I was 10 years old that I wanted to join the IDF. Fulfilled that dream in, what was it? It was March of 2020, right before COVID popped. I served in the Israeli paratroopers for 2 years as a first sergeant and served as the company leading machine gunner in the 190th Paratrooper Battalion for the IDF. I had a squadron under me by the end of my service. So I was in charge of about 5 guys. And then I finished my service in March of 22, came back to New York. I had a degree under my belt already because I had gone to college before, studied finance. And so I started my career in finance and I was in banking. And then, of course, October 7th happens and the whole world is flipped upside down. And I realized something that I didn't know before. And that was I had never done reserves before. And I had never really thought of like reserves in the army as something that I was interested in doing. I always said to myself, though, and I said to my team that if God forbid something were to happen, I would obviously be there. And then obviously there was this opportunity to go back and I felt it was my obligation to be there. And so I didn't realize, though, that you don't do your army service for your army service. You do your army service for when things go crazy and you're needed, right? In reserves, in a war, whatever it might be. Because I mean, my army service was fantastic and I have some really, really special, very fulfilling missions that I went on, things that were really interesting, but nothing compared to wartime and being in Gaza. But we'll get into all that after. I finish my service, I come back, work in finance. October 7th happens. I go back to Israel, rejoin my team. Instead of a heavy machine gunner, I take on a new role. I'm a sharpshooter. So I was a sharpshooter in the war. I was with the same guys that I was with during my regular service. I'm still a squadron commander. And we do about 2 months in Gaza. We also did a bunch of work in Judea, Samaria, as some people would call the West Bank. And after 5 months of the war, we finished, we were released, and I came back in the end of January, very beginning of February, and then restarted my job. But at the same time, I felt this void that I needed to fill, and that void was fulfillment. And I said, you know what, let me start talking about my experience, because I was having a pretty difficult time coming back, as you can imagine, after having been in a war zone to just going back to regular life and doing a regular job. And I needed that feeling of still fighting, right? Like I said before, I'm a born fighter. And so I said to myself, all right, I was on the physical battlefield and I did all that. Now I need to be on the ideological one. And so I decided to start going to college campuses and universities and anybody really who was interested in having me come speak. And I began to speak and I found my 3 tenets. The first tenet, which was immensely important to me and why I really wanted to do it at the beginning, was to empower Jews. Because everybody knows right now we are in a state that is very difficult for Jewish people losing friends right and left, friends not reaching out after October 7th, friends simply just showing their hatred for Israel and for the Jewish people. And kind of, I think any Jew on all ends of the spectrum definitely felt some sense of loss and some sense of change in, I guess you could say, innocence, that they thought that people were supporting them when they really weren't. And so I felt one of my most important tenets is to empower Jews, that we need to fight and that we need to be united. And, of course, I gave some of my stories from the war, but then I found very shortly thereafter that every time I went to speak at a university, there was an immense amount of pushback where I was being targeted by several different crowds of people and different groups who were calling me a baby killer and saying all these crazy things and starting chants. Like they had remember at one of the universities that I spoke at, they had posted on their social media a whole bunch of chants to say against me, outside when they were protesting. One was, Sam, you can't hide, you're committing genocide. And honestly, some of these were pretty clever, but so that's how I kind of found my second tenet, which was having dialogue for peace. And that really stems from the fact that I do not want this war. I did not want to be in this war. And we genuinely want peace. If I never had to step foot in Gaza in the first place, my life would be so much better. Nobody wants to be in this situation. And unfortunately, I think it's very difficult for Israelis to convey that to the world. And as an American who served in the IDF and served in Gaza, I think I'm uniquely positioned to be able to show people that, okay, there is this side who is saying they want peace, and it's us. And unfortunately, we need both sides to want peace for peace to happen. But being that I was there and being that I fought Hamas, I could still say in the same breath that I care about Palestinians and I care about Muslims, and I just want to live in harmony. And that, by the way, that doesn't mean that I won't protect my family and protect Israel and protect the Jewish people. And by the way, not just the Jewish people, anybody living in Israel. That includes Muslims, that includes Christians, that includes Palestinians. I will protect them with my life. And if it means I have to lose my life, I will. But we will not allow terrorists to do whatever they want and commit war crimes and start a war with us and not be able to defend ourselves. And so we are in a time that is so special because we can fight. Like, you look at the 4,000 years of Jewish history. What percentage of Jews in history have actually been able to take arms and fight and defend ourselves? Very, very few. Very, very few. So it's my honor to be able to do that. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with my last tenet, which is humanizing the IDF. And as much as like I said, I am a fighter, I'm fighting for peace, because sometimes peace has to be fought for. And I'm fighting for Palestinians just as much as I'm fighting for Jews. I know, and many Israelis know, and the soldiers that were with me on my team know, that Palestinians aren't our enemy. And I hope that they know that we're not their enemy. The enemy, in the end of the day, is radical terrorism, radical Islam that is propagating us against each other. Right? Iran, not the Iranian people, because the Iranian people actually hate their government, by and large. But the Islamic regime of Iran is, they're the puppeteer behind Hezbollah, behind the Houthis, behind Hamas, behind PIJ, behind Fatah. And they're financing all of this. And so we just want peace with everybody. We don't want to be in this state of war. And I think people in the news, they, show this side of the IDF as being these baby murderers. But like, where does that come from? Anybody that I've spoken to, whether at an encampment or anywhere, by the end of the conversation with me, I always ask them one final question. And it's, can you honestly look me in the eyes and tell me that I'm as bad as they make us out to be, that I look like somebody who kills babies? And not even once is a person able to look me in the eyes and tell me that they think that I've killed children. That's the reality, because I am the same as my team. My team is the same as me, and they're the same as my company, and they're the same as my brigade, and they're the same as the entire IDF. We don't indiscriminately kill people. That's not what we do. We are not aggravators. We do not want to be in the situation to begin with. We just want peace, but we will fight for that peace if we have to. We just hope we don't have to fight at all.
Wow. Yeah. A lot to reflect on here, and seeing your evolution from the start of the war to now, where you're doing these speaking engagements and traveling around the US and talking to people and having difficult conversations. It's just amazing. Before we talk about that, I wanted you to tell me a little bit more about what you saw in Gaza and talk to the listeners here about your experience.
Yeah, what is there? You could talk about Gaza forever. Look, it's a really terrible situation. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that Gaza isn't a pile of rubble right now. It essentially is. And what I like to say a lot of the times is that what happened on October 7th wasn't just the murder of 1,200 Israeli civilians, and it wasn't just the hostage taking of almost 300, and it wasn't just the massacre of people at a music festival. What happened on October 7th was every single Palestinian that has been killed since October 7th, since this war has begun, every single home that has been bombed, every single hospital that has been blown up, every single school that has been tethered, that was all signed by Hamas on October 7th when they decided to attack Israel. They knew very well what was going to happen. They saw it in the past in 2008, 2011, 2012, 2014, 2021, 2023, now with this war. They knew exactly what is waiting for them when they attack Israel, because we've had many wars with them that they have started. Each and every single one they have began, whether taking people hostage, whether shooting rockets into Israel. They have begun every war. They know exactly what we're going to do. And they knew that this would be, the end of them, I guess you could say, and we would not sit idly by as they were massacring our people and taking them hostage. And while we speak, 315 or something days in, and there's still 120 people who are hostage in Gaza. And so we're 10 months in. It's crazy to think about. So what did I see in Gaza? look, where I was, I mean, I was in a whole bunch of different places, but where I was in Gaza, there were no civilians. They had all evacuated. Israel gave them copious amounts of time to evacuate. My battalion was involved in escorting civilians that didn't evacuate to safety, to places where they would be safe. But anybody who was left over and did not leave and did not heed the warnings was considered to be a terrorist. At that point, we've given you the opportunity to leave. We've dropped leaflets. We've escorted you out. If you choose not to leave at that point, when we are telling you that we are coming into this area, you are now considered the enemy. And by the way, the people who did stay were not innocent by any means. I mean, it's very simple when somebody is shooting at you that they are a terrorist. I don't care. Unfortunately, I mean, Hamas recruits children, and you have children who get involved. What I mean by children, I don't mean like 8 years old. I mean like 14, 15-year-olds understand how to use a gun. And from 600, 700 meters, it's very difficult to know if somebody is 18, 15. You don't know. You can't see anything really besides somebody shooting.
It doesn't matter. They're
Exactly.
a fighter, they're a soldier, and they're the enemy.
And it's not our desire for them to be a part of this. Unfortunately, Hamas has put them in the situation where they are telling them, like, you have to die as a shaheed. This is your job. This is the reason you were born. And it is genuinely child abuse, and it is enslavement, essentially. And it is awful. And it is so difficult as a soldier to feel like this is what we're fighting against. We're fighting against a young generation of soldiers that Hamas has put in our way and has really just used as, I mean, I consider them human shields just like anybody else. Mind you, any house that we went into where I was in some way, we found incriminating things there. I mean, it's very simple to say that if you find a tunnel in the backyard of a house or in the bottom floor of a house, or you find ammunition in one of the rooms, or you find an Uzi under a child's bed, or you find an RPG inside of a couch, or you find a box of grenades under a toilet. I mean, whether the innocent person living in that house is aware of these things or not, how are we supposed to take them? I mean, when you see pictures of shaheeds with the Hamas emblem on their refrigerator, and you find Hamas flags and PIJ flags in houses, how are we supposed to take that? And mind you, those people are not occupying the house at the time. These people are gone. But this is now considered to be a terrorist's home. And it's tragic because, yes, you also do find Paw Patrol, like magazine or whatever book for a child in that room, in Arabic. But then under their bed, you're finding a gun. And it's like, we are in such a difficult spot. But like throughout my time there, my team and I, we found tens of entrances to tunnels. And I think that's important to note that we didn't necessarily find like tens of different tunnels. We found different entrances could be to the same tunnel. My team does not go into the tunnels, but we found many, many entrances in all different places. In hospitals, just outside of hospitals. I mean, everywhere. Everywhere that you hear in the news that everybody's saying they aren't there, they are. UNRWA schools especially. I mean, people shooting RPGs at us from UNRWA schools. And again, like, classes are obviously not in session. There's nobody there. And they occupy these schools and start using them as terror bases. But when you hear in the news that IDF blows up school, it's not like a school where there are kids learning there because everybody is gone. What it really is Hamas has now decided, okay, this is a very useful place for us. I mean, it's a massive complex, difficult to really find people in there because it's so big and so many different rooms. You can have tunnels that go throughout the entire complex and get out on the other side. And it really looks bad when Israel has to bomb one of those places, even if there aren't kids there. And so that's what we're really up against. And it is so, so devastating. I think it's also important to note that one of the most surprising things that I found about Gaza was that there were some beautiful, beautiful homes, like swimming pools, talking like extensive gardens with all kinds of fruit, passion fruit, pomelos, dates hanging from, like, it's just like gorgeous, like literally looking like the Garden of Eden. And everybody thinks Gaza is this dump where nobody has anything and whatnot. And to be fair, there are a lot of places that are not great, just like there are a lot of places in New York that aren't so great. But there were more than you would expect. Gorgeous houses, 4-story houses, mansions. And you think like, okay, like, yeah, this person didn't start like a tech company and made a lot of money. This person isn't like in investment banking and is crushing it. This person is probably helping Hamas or PIJ or something one way or another. I remember we went into this cement manufacturing facility, and in my house to this day, I have this declaration that we found in the boss's room, massive facility connected to his house, extensive mansion, but I have this proclamation from Hamas in my house given to the owner of this facility, thanking him for his efforts in helping Hamas build the tunnel networks using his cement. You think on one hand you would say, oh, this poor guy his business is done, whatever. He's helping build roads and helping build buildings and whatever. Yeah, okay, but he's also building infrastructure for Hamas that hostages are currently in. And it's like, you wonder, and I'm sure maybe this is one of the things you want to get into, like, are there any innocent people in Gaza? And I truly believe there are. It's just the amount of innocent people that the world has made it seem like there are is not even close. It's not even close. Everybody knows what's going on. Just like, I would say it's no different than the Germans and the Poles during the Holocaust. Maybe they weren't active members of the Nazi Party, but they knew that there were camps. They knew that there were Jews that were suddenly nowhere to be found. They knew that the ghettos were being liquidated. Where were they going? Maybe they don't know exactly the specifics, but they knew very well that Jews were not being put in hotels and shipped off to a better place, and I feel very strongly that it's very similar in Gaza, where maybe you aren't a terrorist, but sure as hell you know who the terrorists are and which families are involved. I mean, hell, look, in my community, I know the people who are good people and the people who are not so good people, right? Like, people just know. And like, I don't think it's any different there.
Well, that's why in these missions that the Mossad undertakes, a lot of the intelligence they get is from Palestinians who are willing to help the IDF. And I think it's worth mentioning that the criticism from other Jews regarding Israel stems from, well, just because you have a shitty opinion doesn't mean you should be murdered. You know what I mean? By the IDF. Yeah. The problem is the line where it's not an opinion and it's actually an act of terrorism is, one, very thin in these environments. It's very hard to define where the line has been crossed. The risk of assuming someone's a civilian and then finding out that they're a terrorist has really high consequences. And I'll also mention that the IDF does disproportionately more than any other army in the world to try to make the correct judgment in that scenario. And for some reason, they're the only ones that get this amount of criticism. So that's just what I'll mention there. I want to ask you, with all of these reflections, you've then gone and toured a variety of college campuses, even in places like Idaho, where a mob attempted to lynch you and was looking for you in your hotel. I mean, you have put your life on the line in the US talking about what you've seen and doing your speaking engagements. Can you tell me, having visited so many colleges and speaking to Jewish students, what do you think is going on college campuses? And has anyone stumped you in one of the debates that you've had?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just before we get to that, I just want to touch on what you mentioned before. As an IDF soldier, you can't just make a judgment call like, oh, I think this person's a terrorist. There's very, very specific rules of when you're allowed to open fire. It's very, very clear. And if you don't go by those rules, you will likely go to jail, even if you don't end up killing somebody. If you just fire your weapon and there isn't just cause to fire your weapon, you can go to jail for that. And people have. So accountability is a massive thing in the IDF. It's also important to realize what international law says, right? Who is a civilian belligerent, which is spoken about in the Geneva Convention, and that is somebody who is providing essentially material support to a terrorist, and that could be, or to a combatant, right? And they are technically now part of the war. They are no longer a protected civilian, and that could be harboring, a terrorist in their house. That could be giving them monetary support. That could be providing them with any type of shelter, food, whatever. Literally just hiding them and saying, okay, like I know where they are. I'm not going to say where that. Like, if you're part of that, you are forfeiting your protection as an innocent civilian. I think there are a lot of people in Gaza, and I do not believe in just murdering 2 million people. Of course not. God forbid. I do think, though, that it makes it extremely difficult, especially when Hamas is not wearing uniforms, especially when Hamas specifically, and PIJ and all these groups specifically do not know wear uniforms. And so we are already being tasked with not knowing who is who. And then just imagine the stress of having to go into a house and not knowing what's awaiting you there. Is it going to be a 14-year-old kid with a gun? Or is it going to be a suicide bomber? You have no idea what's waiting for you. And it's very, very difficult. But like you said so eloquently, Israel has done more to protect innocent people in this war than any other modern urban war in history. I mean, if you look at the United Nations number, their figure is 9-1 civilian to combatant death ratio in modern urban wars. Israel, even if you take Hamas's number, is at a 1.3-1 number. And that is specifically because of Israel's desire to protect innocent people. I mean, if we were actually trying to commit a genocide, we could have very easily wiped the floor with all of Gaza on October 8th. We chose not to do that. And not only that, we also specifically, like I said, tried to escort people to safety, specifically dropped millions of leaflets, sent millions of messages. Why would we go through all of that if our end game is just to murder them? It makes no sense. So I'd like people to, I often ask them, what would you like to see Israel do that we have not already done? And they don't have an answer. But I digress, and back to your previous question in the name of time. Look, I don't want to say I've never been stumped. I think that when people ask me about if peace is possible, I like to say that I genuinely believe it is. And I don't know if that's me saying that I think it is optimistically, or if I actually do think that it is, because I kind of toggle back and forth. But I don't know. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, why is the media so anti-Israel? I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, you look at, for instance, what's going on in the world right now. After Majd al-Shams, where the 12 kids were killed by Hezbollah, now it's very, very limited social media presence about that amongst any celebrity. Meanwhile, Rafah, where we successfully were able to escort 2 million people essentially out of Rafah to protect them, and did an amazing job while getting rid of the terrorists there. Everybody was posting all eyes on Rafah at millions of reposts. But Majd al-Shams, kids killed, somehow partisan, and news outlets are not reporting on it. And mind you, even look last week, they're talking all about, Israel struck this school and killed whatever it was, however many people that Hamas claimed that we killed. Meanwhile, in Bangladesh, radical Muslims are murdering hundreds of people, if not now thousands of people, of Hindus in the street in Bangladesh, raping women and just massacring people. And there is not a word about it, not a word about it in the media. And so what I like to ask people is, okay, so are you just a hypocrite and you don't apply the same standard to everybody? Or are you an anti-Semite? Because the way that I see it is, in best case, you're a hypocrite, in which case, fix your ways. And in the worst case, you're an anti-Semite or both, which maybe you're both. But it makes no sense that everybody has their eyes on Israel despite everything Israel has done to protect innocent people, and despite the fact that we are attacked on October 7th, and despite the fact that after America has been attacked in any war, we have come with unequivocal and absolute force to deter anybody from doing it again, and nobody says it's genocide. But Israel protects themselves in a war where they have 6 neighbors who want to murder them and wipe them off the map, and somehow we are the ones who are the antagonists. We are somehow the people committing genocide.
Well, that's the part that's most upsetting is everyone, what precedent are we going to set here that we can just go in and kill 1,200 people and infiltrate a music festival and the government's not going to go and try to get its people back that are now taken hostage? It's logical fallacies up the wazoo with these people, especially on college campuses. Is there anything we can do as young Jewish people to try to prevent this? Has anything worked for you when you've spoken to people who initially heavily disagreed with you?
Yeah, I'll target that second question first because I think it's a really important point. When I try and speak to people, it's a little bit more difficult I was at the DC rally against Bibi a couple of weeks ago, and when he came to speak before Congress, and it's very difficult in that kind of environment where everything is very tense to have proper conversations with people about peace. But I have found a lot of success in going about the question not even as a question of how we can move forward, but saying listen, your grandfather is my grandfather. Your Ibrahim is my Avraham, right? We come from the same family. What can we do? What can I do? as an IDF soldier, as a Jew, to help you understand that we care about Palestinians, we care about the plight, we see the plight, and we just want peace, right? I want peace for the Palestinians just as much as you do, and I hope you want peace for the Jews just as much as I do. I think in the end of the day, the best successes that I've had is if you show empathy and you show humanization. They have to show humanization, otherwise they really just look pretty bad. Whereas if you're trying to be, for lack of a better term, a smartass, and you're trying to outwit them in every single point, they're just going to become defensive and you're not going to get anywhere. So humanizing people, I think, is the number one thing that you can do, because in the end of the day, they are suffering. It's you can't excuse the fact that they're not, like, this is a war and there is suffering going on both sides, but especially their side. There are 40,000 people who probably have been killed. I mean, we could argue what the exact numbers are of combatants versus civilians, but like, there are a lot of people who have died. There's a lot of houses who have been completely demolished, a lot of cities that are completely gone, people uprooted and displaced, and that's terrible. And in the end of the day, I place that blame on Hamas and Hamas exclusively for that. But we have to understand that they will not see it that way. We have to understand that they will see that as Israel being the aggressor and that we are responsible, even if we aren't. And so the only thing we can do, just like when somebody is mad at you, the best way to go about it is not to yell at them back in their face and say, no, you're wrong. No, the best way to do it is to say, I hear you, I understand, and I'm sorry. And I wish that this wasn't the case. What can I do to make it better? And if somebody is really interested in peace, you know, that they're willing to have a conversation with you about that. But as Abba even said, you know, people keep saying, oh, they want their territory back. They want their territory back. But they're unwilling to negotiate. They're unwilling to come to the table. They're unwilling to make concessions. And so they kind of just want everything by immaculate conception. You can't get there unless people are willing to have a conversation and willing to, you know, come to the table. Unfortunately, we've seen throughout history that when we have come to the table, I mean, you look at the Camp David Accords in 2000, we offered 94.6% of what they were asking for, what Arafat was asking for. They still said no. And then in 2008, you know, Ehud Olmert, he offered 95% of everything they were asking for. Still said no. So it's like, is this about land or is this about your hatred? Because it doesn't feel like it's about land. This feels like you just do not want to accept the right of Israel to exist. And in terms of we as young Jews, I don't even think it has to be young Jews, it's any Jew. I think the best thing that we can do is really arm ourselves with information. And we're talking about a time where truth means less and less, and how people view things is valued way more than truths, which is really scary. But I mean, we need to show up, right? Like, we need to have people who are willing to, at least, if you don't have the information, that's fine, but show up and wear your Israeli flag. Double down on your pride. Double down on your identity. Because the way I always say it is that, you know, the Holocaust didn't begin with people just like going into gas chambers and into crematorium. It began by them vilifying Jews to the point where they were no longer people. And the Jews took it. They took it thinking it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And by the way, we're on that same trajectory. It's going to get worse.
I was about to say, we are those Jews back at the beginning of the Holocaust.
And if we do not wear our kippot and our Jewish star necklaces and, you know, wear everything with pride and be proud to be Jewish, I guarantee you there will come a time where, just like they did before, they will make us wear it. And so I would rather that we do it by choice than them force us. And we really, really, really need to understand the history. And we need to understand that, man, if we don't learn this history, I think it was Mark Twain who said, those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it. We're 10 years from now, we are going to see a really different landscape of Jews in the diaspora. I don't know if there will be Jews in that diaspora. I don't know what will be. But I know one thing for sure. There will still be people hating Jews. And so we need to arm ourselves and be strong as possible, so that we don't live the same life our grandparents did.
Yeah, and we can't let these people strip us of our dignity, is the thought that comes to mind for me. So switching gears here, I noticed doing some Instagram stalking, although I would say I know you pretty well, I saw something new on your profile. I saw that you are now an advisory editor at the Green Golem.
True.
What is the Green Golem and what are you trying to do with it?
The Green Golem is actually a Zionist magazine, the first and only of its kind. Maybe there's something else that tried to be like them, but it is essentially a magazine for all things Zionism. People write about Zionist topics. They post content like myself. And we really just try to show people that Zionism isn't as scary as the world makes it out to be, right? In the end of the day, what is Zionism? It's not Palestinians have to go. It's not we want to kill people. It's the right of Jews to self-determine their ancestral homeland. It's that simple. And if you can get behind that, then you're a Zionist too. And so we're just trying to, I guess, demask the Zionist scaries that the world sees.
And is it published yet? Where can people read the articles?
Yeah, I think if you go on Instagram, there's a link. I believe they have a website as well. So you could just go on greengolem.com and check it out.
Awesome. And how can people connect with you and watch some of your videos?
Best way to do that is to check me out on Instagram. If you want to follow me, my handle on Instagram is @samfried26. That's FRIED. I am trying to constantly, I don't churn out content all the time, but when I do, I try and make it very powerful content. But I'm always interested in speaking. So if anybody's interested in having me come to their university or to their community, or Jewish, non-Jewish, Muslim, it does not matter to me. I am willing to speak to everybody because in the end of the day, I just want to broker peace.
I am waiting for the day that some of your debate videos get released in their entirety, because you put really spicy clips and I'm like, oh, I want to know what that person said, or I want to know how they responded. But then it gets cut off because that's what creates the intrigue, Yeah. So I hope that either you start a YouTube channel or you put them on Instagram, because I want to watch the full thing.
Yeah, I would love that. I actually have some cool stuff coming up, so stay tuned. There might be some cool debates with some interesting people coming up in the very, very near future. So looking forward, and I would love to leave with one quote that I think is really important. And the quote goes as follows: "War is one of the worst things in the entire world, but it's not the worst thing. The worst thing in the entire world would be living your entire life without ever finding anything worth fighting for." And that was something that my rabbi said to me before I went to the war to fight in Gaza. I think, especially now, with all the loss that we've felt, we need to understand that every single generation, it's not just a punchline, but every single generation has tried to destroy us because we are Jewish, because we are this continuous cycle of Judaism from 4,000 years ago until today. We cannot let that go. That is the most important thing. We will be killed for it, but we will not lose it. So we just got to be proud, be strong, and Am Yisrael Chai.
That was very powerful, Sam. I can't let you off the hook yet because I got to ask you one last question. It's one that I ask every single guest.
Sure.
Who would you like to nominate for People Jew Want to Know podcast?
Ooh, good question. I would like, have you ever done your own podcast? That would be cool. If you have
what would you like to hear?
I don't know, about your life. I feel like you could do a whole podcast where you ask a question and then you answer the question.
Okay, I'll have my brother interview me. How about that? He's so funny.
I think that would be sick. I think people want to know about you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Okay, it's been a real privilege and just an eye-opening experience to do this together. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Margarita. Okay, cheers, everybody. Take care.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Jew Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram @People Jew Want to Know.